Live. Hey, welcome everybody and good day to you all, and welcome to the Curse of Oak Island and Beyond live stream. I am your host, Jeff Freeman, and over here I have my special co-host, Alessandra Nadudvari. Welcome, Alessandra.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to have the front seat of this podcast.
We're great. Glad to have you here. And today, folks, I am so honored, and we are both so honored to have our special guest today, Christopher Morford and Corjan Mol. And you guys, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, it certainly is an honor to have you both here. And I know that many of our members that we have in the group and those that are watching over on the Twitch side today, they may not know a whole lot about you. So I wanted to do just a brief introduction, if we could, of both of you, if you don't mind. I know that some people don't like to talk about themselves, but we certainly like to hear a little bit of a background. And Christopher, we'll start with you, if you don't mind. So you are a businessman, obviously, business owner and a composer, and I guess you were also involved in a movie at some point at time, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, well, yeah, this was back in Chicago. I was a musician professionally. I went to Berklee College of Music out in Boston, and then Columbia College in Chicago, finished up there. And I was a studio recording engineer for a while. Musician on the side, and started scoring or writing themes for commercials and movies and things like that. So wow. I got to know these were just local, they were very good independent films, but I was happy to be invited to write the scores for them. So I composed a few, and but I don't think many people have seen them, but proud of them nonetheless.
And so now you spend a lot of your spare time doing research on fascinating subjects in history, and I know you're going to be sharing some of that with us here today. So thank you for being here again.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And Corjan, you are also involved in music and movies and all types of different things. Tell us a little bit about your background.
I have two hobbies gone out of hand. One of them being music. Always been making music. I'm not a very good guitarist, or even though you see loads of guitars and keyboards and stuff, but I'm really more of a songwriter and singer. Won several awards in the US, played in Nashville, in Atlanta. Wow. And in the last couple of years, I've been involved in the dance music scene here in the Netherlands with quite some success, if I may be so non-modest, which is fun. And my other hobby gone mad was history research. So always had a great interest in history and mysteries. Started going to Rennes Chateau a long time ago, sometimes together with my dad, and been researching that ever since. And then through all sorts of mazes, ended up on Oak Island.
Absolutely, and I think of course our group is Curse of Oak Island and Beyond, and everybody just loves to get information that would tie back to that for sure. And I know you're going to be sharing some of that with us today. Now, both of you were back. You were on Oak Island, and you were on the show back in season 7. A little bit more information came out last year, but in season 7, I think it was episodes 8 and 9. And you shared, and again, we know that you guys are out on that island. You get to a tour of the island. You're filmed for hours and hours and hours, and then you get about 15 minutes worth of airtime to explain stuff. And I didn't know how much fun in that. But many of our members, I'm sure they've seen it, and but I didn't know how much you wanted to talk about that, because I know you guys got a ton of new research that we're going to cover today. But if you don't mind, just a little bit of a brief background on some of what you discussed then, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay.
Whichever one of you.
Yeah, this is where it gets awkward.
Yes.
Yeah. Shall I take it off? For me, I'll try to keep this short, which is difficult for me, so bear with me. So I was approached just before the airing. That's nonsense. I think in June. Which year is it? 2019, I think.
Wow.
By a research assistant who asked me a question. Could I say something about Poussin, because he kept coming up in stuff they were researching, and could I clarify that a little bit? At the time, I didn't know this was about the show The Curse of Oak Island.
Oh, wow.
So I explained a little bit. Nicolas Poussin, who's a 17th century classical, the 17th century classical French painter, who figures prominently in the mystery of Rennes-le-Château. So I guess that's how they found my name, because I run a website about that, and I had been in, for example, in the Forbidden History television series. So I gave him some information, and then they invited me for a camera test on a Friday night. And I never forget, the screen opened, and there I was in the war room of Oak Island with all of the team, which was really exciting. So did my audition, and the same night I got a ticket, and on Sunday I landed on Oak Island. Well, I didn't land on the island. I landed in Halifax, and I think it's the day after. I was thrown out of a plane over Oak Island, and I landed in the middle of the
Aim
swamp.
for the cross.
Landed right for the cross.
But there, I landed on on a Sunday, and on the Monday I met the marvelous Mr. Morford. So it was quite nice. What we did there together is because Chris also brought a theory about Nicolas Poussin. Basically, and you have to imagine, they asked me to develop a theory. So this is not something I thought up, and I actually had quite some trouble making the connection at first. I'd never really thought about it. I never paid any real attention to Oak Island, because it's literally far away from Rennes-le-Château, and literally far away from Europe, where Mr. Poussin had his dealings. But by examining his work and then discovering that on his most famous painting, The Shepherds of Arcadia, you have this inscription on the tomb which says, "Et in Arcadia ego," and then Arcadia being the original name of Arcadia, named by Giovanni di Verrazzano in 1525 for Francis I, the French king. There could be some connection. Now, this painting, or an earlier version of it, was dependent, or let's say the twin of another painting he did, which features something you could explain as a gold river. And then if you would combine the two, you could, if you would know some stuff, then these two paintings could put you within 5 miles from Oak Island. That's literally what I said in the war room. And we started to develop from there. And then there was one thing that we already knew. That's not something that Chris or I discovered. The painting Shepherds of Arcadia was based on the geometrical shape of a pentagram. So there's the 5-pointed star, which was the template for the painting, which was used to to direct the figures and to make the scene. And then I had this idea, Nolan's cross consisting of 5 boulders. You only need 4 boulders to make a cross, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So what's that 5th boulder doing there? And on my crappy internet screen print of Nolan's cross, I could perfectly fit a pentagram, and that's how I came to Oak Island. And then, of course, when Steve Guptill mingled in, we micro positioned everything and found a spot in the swamp where we found this huge stone, which is now called the Arcadia stone. Still regret we didn't call that the Mole stone or the Morford stone.
Yeah, exactly.
But there you go. The Christopher stone. And there you go. And I think that's where we left off at the end of season 7. Did I forget anything, Chris?
No, that's about it. If you wanted to, should we just do a brief overview of the alignments and things like that,
Sure.
just to get people up to speed, So that we kind of took it from that point on, and we continued our research. We became very good friends. I'm glad they brought us together there on the islands. We had 2 different theories, but they overlapped on so many points that they said, you guys should really work together. And I'm glad we did. It worked out great. and we came up with things that we wouldn't have otherwise on our own, I think. So
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. So and from there we ended up at Versailles, and finding that alignment like an arrow from Versailles straight to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
And putting the clues together further, it seemed without a doubt that the intended target on the other end was Oak Island. So even if the degrees were not pinpoint accuracy, and you got to remember that from Versailles to Jerusalem, the Holy Land was well known, well mapped out. I think that alignment was quite easy to do at that time, but over a body of water like the ocean to Oak Island, the other direction, was a bit more difficult. And but when you start putting all the clues that we gathered together, amassing all that, it was beyond a doubt that that was the intent, beyond a shadow of a doubt for us.
Yeah, and that's really something that's very significant. Now, and we noticed that line, when you took the line all the way from the Temple Mount all the way across to the France, and then all the way to Oak Island, it did miss Versailles by just a few miles, 50 miles or something, but still, I mean, you have to, that's not a coincidence that it went through there at all. I mean, that alignment, I mean, even with the tools that they had at the time, that's significant. That's really significant. And I know that we all looked at that going, wait a minute, really? Is that true? Did that line really extend that way? And I guess it leaves us wondering, what was the big connection between, well, Jerusalem and France or Versailles at that time? And then the development of the menorah on the ground there. I mean, I know you guys will probably get to this, and it's just a question that popped into my head, was that, where was the connection between the Temple Mount and France and the building of the Palace of Versailles at that time? Is that, I mean, where did that all come about?
It does seem very odd at first.
Yeah, it does.
The French king lay out a giant menorah in his backyard.
Exactly.
Like I said,
go ahead.
The more we dug, it started to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Just for one example, as the princes are coming up, the Dauphin, as they call them, if you're the king to be, you would be handed a book called The Mirror of Princes. And that is a workbook. It's a guide for a new prince on how to be a good king. And they will give examples in there. And in the French instances, it was always the biblical kings, and specifically David and Solomon. So if you're going to combine being a very wise ruler and a good ruler, you would go with Solomon, the wisest king of all. And so Louis and the other kings before him would definitely have been instructed with these books on how to be like Solomon. And having your domain pointing right at Solomon's temple said a lot. Kind of, he's really trying to be like King Solomon. And it went on for there. That's just one example, but I'm sure we'll bring up a few more here.
No.
Yeah, so it was absolutely amazing to see what they did. So the first question that comes up in your head is like, could they do this? And then recently we find more and more writings by architects, mathematicians, scientists, astronomers who created works as early as half the 16th century that detail exactly how you had to make these alignments. And we know from the memoirs of people on the court that Louis XIV was highly interested in these things. And if for example, if you read the memoirs of Madame de Montespan, who was one of his mistresses, you can read that, for example, the position of the new Royal Observatory in Paris had to be in a very precise spot to be aligned precisely with the Palace of Luxembourg. And in the end, when they pinpointed the location. They bought a pentagonal piece of land to found the observatory on.
Wow.
As Chris said, the alignment of the central axis of Versailles to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and you can only call that eerie precision. It's perfect.
Yep.
The alignment that we presented from Versailles to Oak Island on season 8 had a deviation of something like under a degree. By now, we know the exact place they were pointing at. It's just as precise as Jerusalem. We can't share it yet, but the place is there. It makes perfect sense. I can't believe how we missed it in season 8. But it's again, it's a mind-blowing story. And your other question, Jeff, and how does this all tie together? So how do you tie Jerusalem to Versailles, to Oak Island? Part of the answer there is the Royal House of France, which is very old.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like you were saying, you made the comment about the fact that line, points to something else, but that's part of the research. I mean, when you're researching something like this, and I know, believe me, I've not done any as much research on any of the stuff that like you guys have, and even Alessandra, she's done a ton of research on many things as well. So, but that's part of the research, is that as you go, you're discovering more and more and more. And then you take those clues and those answers that you're getting and you compile them together to come up with the actual theory of what happened. And you're proving it based upon the research you've done. So it's nothing to say, look what why didn't we discover it then? But then that's part of what research is about. You're expanding that continual research going on. And you guys are going to come up with discoveries. You're going to share. I know you're going to share some things, what you can share with us today. But as you go on in the future, there's going to be more stuff that we're going to have you back and talk about later on, because I know you're going to find new things to talk about.
This never ends. Yeah, go ahead, Alessandra.
I'm intrigued by the usage of pentagram by the Royal House of France and the Mistresses of the Kings, for example. Why would they pick pentagram as a shape? What does it do in practical terms? Does it create some kind of energy within the area of the pentagram? I doubt that it's just symbolic, so it must do something on the ground. So what does it do?
Mm-hmm. One thing it does, and going back to the Temple of Solomon, there is a tradition that Solomon, when he was building his temple, he employed the use of spirits, goetic spirits, so to speak, a type of magic used by John Dee and others. And for that, he had a ring given to him by Archangel Michael, I believe, which had an insignia on it. A lot of people do believe that was the hexagram, the six-pointed Star of David on the ring. But if you read the Testament of Solomon book, it clearly says that it was a pentathlon. So he used the pentagram to control these spirits, to build the temple. And he could use that to subdue them and get them to do his will and trap them as well. And so it is a talisman in that way, just to bring it back to the Temple of Solomon. So it has many other attributes as well, but I think that's an important one in this story.
So one of the spirits or entities that Solomon employed was called Asmodeus, right?
Yes.
And the statue of Asmodeus is in the church in Rennes-le-Château.
It is.
Yeah, he's guarding the entrance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
True.
And he was subdued by water as well, and you can see he's under the water fount in there. So that's sort of keeping him in place, keeping him in check.
He would come down from, I don't know, the sky or heaven to drink from a well that was on earth, right?
Oh.
And that's where Solomon trapped him, was when Asmodeus came down for a drink.
I do believe you're right.
There was a well. And one thing that Asmodeus had was special tools. For example, there was one tool called Shamir. It was also known as the hissing serpent. Apparently, according to the Jewish law at the time, Solomon was not allowed to use iron or metal tools to cut stone for his temple. So he had to come up with an alternate way to build the temple. So he went to Asmodeus, who then gave him the use of this weird tool called shamir, kind of like a sonic drill, I think, to shape the stone and to erect the temple.
Yes.
Wow.
Fascinating story.
You did your research well.
Yeah.
That's why she's here. Instead of keeping this stuff up, let me tell you.
The way we've seen it on the ground, the pentagram is a shape that protects what's inside.
Okay.
I believe it's also related to Venus.
Mm-hmm.
That is one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
because Venus draws a pentagram over Earth as it travels in the sky, and it takes 8 years for Venus to complete its cycle and to draw the Venus pentagram. So Venus draws this rose over Earth all the time. So we live under the rose.
Yeah, that's really interesting too, because I had never, you know, being somebody that loves to look up at the stars.
Sub Rosa, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's interesting. So the actual orbit of Venus makes a pentagram orbit of the Earth, or with the Earth involved.
Yeah.
It does.
That's amazing.
It does, and it takes 8 years, like 8 years and a little bit to draw the pentagram. And when you look it up online, the audience can probably do it right now. Venus pentagram, the cycle that it draws the pentagram, but it takes 8 years to do it, and it literally looks like a rose.
Yeah, it's 8 years.
And also Venus is one of the only planets who travels west in the sky.
Really?
Right. Yep.
I didn't know
all
that.
The others travel east. So if you look at, for example, Shepherds of Arcadia, you see Venus standing on the right in the east. In some depictions, when they're reversed, they make her travel to the west.
I didn't know that.
And that's something interesting too about that picture. The Shepherds of Arcadia is the fact that you know, she's standing there, but the colors that are used for their clothing is kind of interesting, with, you know, the Mars being the red, and then she's, I believe, wearing the yellow. I had a picture of it. I could bring it out, but I that was interesting too. So there's a lot of references in that painting that mean, you know, that are standing out. A lot of different clues in there, I guess you could say, that are just phenomenal. There's also where the shadow of the arm, you know, when he's pointing to something on the actual stone there, or to a, you know, and you see the shadow, and the shadow is like, it doesn't look like an arm at all. It looks like a sickle.
It does.
And it's like, that's not an artist's mistake. You know, he didn't make that mistake. He's
Nope.
you know, so that means something. And that's all those little clues are things you guys picked out, which is absolutely fascinating. And I did not know that. Yeah.
Oh man, that painting is incredible. If you count the number of arms, there's 7 arms on the painting. There's so there should be 8 arms, but there's 7 arms, like a menorah. So there's a lot of connections there. Yeah.
Did Poussin come up with this on his own, or was he given detailed instructions by somebody else to make the painting the way he did, and to include all the elements that are in it?
Nobody knows.
The phrase was not his, but
the phrase was not his, but we believe the execution and the setup was his.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's really interesting stuff. Yeah, and even the words, it's the it's what was the words that were actually painted, but I know you are not, you know, that were marked on that stone, and then you kind of moved them around, the letters around to indicate some other stuff, but everything's a clue. So it was like en route to Arcadia, is that what it was, or something like that?
It's et in Arcadia ego could be itego arcana dei. Begone, I conceal the secrets of God. Jit Neo Arcadia, go on a trip to New Arcadia. There's Ariadne Goetica is another. That's one of Chris's, which I dearly, dearly love. And they could all be true, and somehow they all tie in to the same storyline.
I was really fascinated when you had taken the pentagram and you laid it over top of Nolan's cross, and like you had mentioned earlier, you know, you need only 4 stones to make a cross, but there's that 5th one. And why did they have a 5th one? There's no, you know, no answer except for the theory you came up with laying that pentagram over it. And then when you take the 5 corners of the pentagram and they point to a center marker, and that center marker is, I think there was one that I was watching, it's the eye of the swamp. And you know, and that's something that, you know, the members hear me talk about this whenever we were talking Oak Island stuff, is that I want that eye dug up. I mean, that eye of that swamp has got to be something more to it than what they've, you know, Ian Spooner went out there and he was messing around. Oh yeah, it's a mine for blue clay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's possible, I suppose, but dig it up. Let's find out. Let's dig it up.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Ian is a fantastic guy. He was on the island when I was there. That was the time that he had just started in season 7. So he was quite new to the mystery, like I was. So I had lunch with him. I think on the 1st or the 2nd day that I was there, and I remember that he told me, you know, we're finding this stuff here and these datings, and that I have no idea how I can tell my colleagues on the university, because they will think, you know, I made it up. But he didn't. You know, this is real research, is real scientific stuff. And he was absolutely amazed by what he found. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he dated some of the swamp to the 1200s and then again to the 1600s.
Yeah.
So does that fit your theory?
You know, some people do or don't believe, you know, that the Templars were involved here. What we do know is that at least, you know, there's a link to the Templars, to the stuff that Chris and I are investigating. And what we try to do is we go back to the original source and, you know, just read what it says, and then we add it all up, we put it on a timeline, and then if you read the timeline, you know, from left to right, history will reveal what happened, and it's remarkable what you find. One of the things we found is that there was an intersect inside the temple, and this is all, you know, you can deduct this very easily from public sources. So you know, the Knights Templar were arrested in in 1307. Yeah, 14th of October 1307. And then in the years after that, the Templar trials started, and you can learn a lot from the testimony. So if you go back to the original Latin texts, then of course the first thing you find is June 1308, when Jean de Chalon in France, in Poitiers, testifies that he's seen the master of the order, Gérard de Villiers, who fled with 50 horses to a place where they have 18 galleys waiting, which supposedly is La Rochelle. But then in July, so 1 month later, another name, Hugues de Chalon, emerges in a very interesting document, which is kept in the Vatican, which says, I'll spare you the Latin, but it says that the brother Hugues de Chalon, the nephew of the visitor and brother of Gérard de Montclair, warriors of the order of the sect of the temple, together with some more accomplices, formed the same sect, and they planned to kill the king. So this is in an official testimony in the Vatican. And then later, 2 years later, Raoul de Prel, who was a legal counsel, who was a witness to the prosecution in the trial of the Templars in Sens, just under Paris, testifies that, you know, when he lived in Laon, a place in France, he was friends with Gervais de Beauvais, who had claimed over 100 times that there was a section in the order so secret that he would rather have cut his head off than to tell anyone. And there was also a point in the general chapter of the order that was so secret that if Raoul de Prel, so this legal counsel, or even the King of France would see it, those holding the chapter would seek to kill him, deferring the authority of no one in this. And furthermore, Gervais had said the order had a small book of statutes, which he would show, to Prel willingly, but there existed another secret book which he would not show to anyone for the world. So, so you learn two things. There was an intersect inside the temple that had a secret which was so powerful that anyone, who came to know of it would have to be killed, even if it was the king. And then, maybe even this is the motive why Philip IV started prosecuting the Templars, because maybe he had become privy to a secret and they were after his life. Who knows? But just, as an example of the things you learn from these records. And then the connection to perhaps North America. It's not crystal clear, but if you look at the trial records of the Inquisition in Holyrood in Scotland, and this is November 1309, you had two Templars there, Walter of Clifton and William of Middleton, who testified to the Inquisition, and they say literally, upon receipt of the papal bull condemning the order. And you have to imagine that the arrest order reached Scotland a little bit later than the rest of Europe because it was further away. So, it took some more time. So he says, the minute we learned of this bull, many of the knights cast off their habits and fled at once. And then they say in Latin, ultra mare, across the sea. They fled at once across the sea. Now you have to imagine they were in Scotland. So where would they go across the sea? They couldn't go back to the mainland because they would have been arrested or even killed there. So then, if you know that the seafaring route from Scotland to North America, had been known for at least 300 years by then, and it was almost routinely sailed from the Orkneys to go fish for cod. Or to go search for timber, or maybe other resources, then I don't think it's so far-fetched. If you fear for your life, and there's no one, there's nowhere else to go, it's not so far-fetched, to put your family on a boat and sail, to Iceland, to Greenland, to North America. You can ask any refugee from Syria. If you fear for your life, you will do whatever it takes to reach safety.
Right.
And once suppose this really happened, once you landed in, let's say, Nova Scotia, your first priority would not be to record your presence there for future generations, so Jeff Freeman and Corjan Mol can have a discussion about it on the internet. Now you would fear for your safety, make sure shoot some deer, get some food for your family, build a hut, and try to make peace with with the First Nation people that you meet. So, are there no records? No, of course there aren't any records. Are we sure this happened? No, of course we aren't. No, we weren't there. Right. But is it unthinkable? Because it's not accepted history. This is, in my mind, and reading the trial record from the Inquisition, it's a very logical thing.
Yep, it makes total sense. And I know Alessandra
makes all the sense in the world
too. Yeah, her and I talked about that, even connecting that to the Vikings and the Norse. Would have had moved some. Yeah, I'll let her elaborate on that. But
I was just taking some breath, and I was like, getting ready to speak.
All this research is going to come pouring out.
I want to say something that I think the audience might not be aware of, and it's an interesting piece to the puzzle, I think. So you mentioned the Norse connection and how the Templars would have used Norse ships, perhaps, or at least crews to get to North America. Now, this didn't happen in the 1300s. It happened in the 1200s, but it's on record. So in Iceland, there was a man who was a wealthy merchant, a politician, and he was also a poet. His name was Snorri Sturluson, and
Snorri.
Snorri, and he
Good name.
he
My wife
he
calls
wrote
me Snorri. Yeah.
he wrote. Oh, come on, it's Snorri. Let's not offend the
I'll shut
Icelandic
up now.
people.
I'll shut up now. Sorry.
All right. So Snorri Sturluson was trying to, I think, get elected into the parliament in Iceland, and he had a rival, a political rival, and he decided to show up during the election with some force, with a show of strength, and he hired 80 knights who came armed and in uniform, and they were from elsewhere. They were from overseas. So they were not local. They were not from Iceland. There were 80 of them, and they apparently dressed in the same uniform. They were armed, and they came to support him in the election. Nobody seems to know the identity of these 80 knights, where they were from. I think that some people tried to kind of track them down, but the description in the Icelandic records is very vague. And what's strange about it is that I think Snorri was seeking a political alliance with the Kingdom of Norway. And I guess the Norwegian king might have sent him some men to help sway the election in the right way. But
sounds familiar, huh?
but I was told by a Norwegian friend that even the king of Norway at the time did not have his own standing army, and that pretty much no European monarch did. Now we have the military, right? That's part of every country, and the taxpayers fund that. But back then, if you were a king and you wanted to go to war, you had to tell your nobleman, bring me so many men for this battle. And sometimes the nobleman didn't show up, and the battle didn't go very well. But there was no standing army. So the Norwegian king could not send Snorri 80 of his own soldiers because he didn't have them. So who were they? And it would have been expensive for anybody to have 80 warriors on payroll, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So some people think that they were from from a religious military order like the Knights Templar or the Knights Hospitaller, maybe even Teutonic Knights or someone like that. But the question is, what were they doing in Iceland, and why were they willing to help Snorri? Because it wasn't cheap to travel, to launch an expedition. So what were they doing? Who were they? What were they doing in Iceland? And then where did they go from there once the election was over? Did they return back to Europe, or did they sail west?
Yeah, that was Court Lindahl put up that little statement there about Snorri and the Verne's journey to the center of the earth. That was interesting. I did not know that. So that was his little statement there. Thank you, Court.
Fantastic.
Hey, Court.
Yeah. Cheers, man.
We did have one question that we kind of jumped by there real quick, and I wanted to go back to it. It was from Deidre. You guys know Deidre White. She's watching. She's out there today. Welcome, Deidre. She wanted to know, she said that Christopher had mentioned a book. She said she wants to know what the name of the book was that you mentioned, the one that the Prince of France would be given to learn about being a king. What was the name of that book? Remember?
They were known as the Mirrors of Princes.
Mirror of Princes. Interesting. Okay.
There were several of them. They were all a bit different, but they all used the biblical kings as a reference.
Yes.
Specifically David and Solomon.
Okay. Yep. I know James McQuiston is also out there watching, and he wants to give a call in. So we'll set that up here in just a minute. We'll get that. Oh yeah. And Deidre said thank you for that. So if we as we go along here, we'll see about that. I know you guys want to get to some of the new research, and you kind of touched on it already a little bit. May
I ask one question before we go into the new research?
Yes,
sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry, Jack. Okay, it's quick. So I know that Poussin's painting Shepherds of Arcadia is modeled after a very specific should I say, tomb or sarcophagus that used to exist in Rennes-le-Château or outside of Rennes-le-Château. It was the stone sarcophagus that was just out in the country. It doesn't exist anymore. I think the farmer or the landowner of the owner of that land was having trouble with too many tourists, so I think he just blew it up.
Mm-hmm.
So that tomb or sarcophagus that's in the painting is no longer, like, it no longer exists in real life. But apparently the painting sets a scene that actually exists outside of Rennes-le-Château, with some of the mountains or peaks that are identifiable by shape and name. And it occurred to me that on Oak Island, we have a link to Rennes-le-Château in the form of that lead cross that was found by Rick Lagina and Gary Drayton. We don't know when that cross was dropped there on the beach, how it got there, but we know that the lead came from a mine outside of Rennes-le-Château. So we have a lead cross made from metal that was mined outside of Rennes-le-Château. And then we have Poussin's painting, which seems to show a scene from Le Château, and it also seems to fit over the swamps on Oak Island.
Well, the lead came from a mine that is 165 kilometers from Rennes-le-Château.
Okay.
So
well,
that's quite a distance. That tomb is a bit of an enigma. For sure, it wasn't there when Poussin lived. It's even debatable if he was ever in the south of France. He could have crossed the area when he traveled to Rome, but it wouldn't really have been on the way. So the actual tomb we're discussing here, on top of my head, was built in 1933 by Louis Bertrand.
Based on the painting?
Perhaps. It's not. That's not known. It is an unusual story. The guy, I think, put the embalmed body of his grandmother in it, and indeed, some people say. I mean, if you would have been at the spot, it's in Le Pontil, close to Rennes-le-Château, Rennes-les-Bains, and a place called Arques, in the south of France. If you stand at, I stood there many times. If you look at the backdrop, it is a bit reminiscent of what Poussin put in his painting. I mean, that's clear. If that was intentional, no idea. If you look at, Poussin was renowned for his landscapes, and he uses the different or the similar sorts of peaks and shapes in his paintings. But many of them look to be fantasy. So it's a bit of an enigma why this gentleman built this tomb, in this shape, and it is very much like the tomb in Shepherds of Arcadia.
Okay. So you don't think that that tomb that existed outside Rennes-le-Château had anything to do with Poussin's painting? And you also don't think that...
No, the facts would not support that.
All right, well, that's good to know. And you also don't think that the lead cross from Oak Island has anything to do with Rennes-le-Château?
No, I don't.
Okay.
One of the links that there are between Oak Island and Rennes-le-Château, and this one is very remote. And you and I discussed this when we set up this call, Alessandra. Based on the tartan you're wearing. One of the stations of the cross in Rennes-le-Château has a little boy which allegedly is wearing a tartan with colors similar to yours, which are the colors of the Gunn family of Scotland. And James Gunn allegedly joined Sinclair in 1397, when allegedly he traveled to North America.
Well, why would the painting in Rennes-le-Château show a boy wearing a gun tartan, the tartan of Clan Gunn?
No idea.
Oh, come on!
I really have no idea. For me, it's one of those little factoids that you find while researching. Maybe we should investigate a little bit more. But I sort of try to stay away from the Sinclair legend. I don't need the Sinclair legend to make it plausible for me that people traveled from Scotland to North America, as I just explained. I think that was it made a lot of sense. So whether or not it was Henry Sinclair or someone else, I'm sure there were Europeans, Scottish people in North America way before people think they were there today. And whether or not it was Mr. Sinclair, it could have been him or anyone else.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm one of the people that believe in that as well. There's just too much evidence to say that, or at least in my mind, that to say it otherwise. There's just too many little connections that could be made with that lead that to believe. And Alessandra and I have talked about that. And there's been other people. We've even talked with Team Templar North America that have talked about some of that same information. Yeah. With Sean Williamson, working with the Sinclair family. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, that leads that.
Sean Williamson is descended from Flying Gun.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah.
Another time he's going to be on the show coming up again here pretty soon too. So it's and that's why I was telling you guys earlier, when we were having our pre-show meeting, and I was talking about how, a lot of this information, I had no idea that it was going on. I really hadn't looked into the background of knowing that the Vikings had made their way up across, to Iceland and all that, but not really worried about too much about what happened with the Templar. And now that's all I want to do is I want to get more and more and more information on all this stuff and the connection to North America that they've had. And again, that puts you right into, Oak Island. And again, like you said earlier, Corjan, can we say definitively that this happened? No, we cannot. There's been no absolute proof of it yet. Hopefully that will come. But man, the clues just add up. It's just I don't know. I'm a believer in that for sure. And like you said, there's a lot of people that don't. There's a lot of people that no, they've never been over here. Why would they have come over here? But they had to escape. And then when they got here. And again, going with my thinking that they came here, they're not going to say, okay, here we are. We're the Templar and the Knights Templar, and we're in North America now. Are they going to hide? And are they going to keep maybe change who they are and kind of disguise this a little bit? They're not going to make an announcement. They're not going to be documents showing what they've done because they don't want their hiding. So yeah, they're going to change, their name. They're going to change who they are. They're going to, and they're going to have to work with the indigenous people of the area and make friends and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's just too much that goes down that road that leads us there for sure. Okay. I know we've James McQuiston. I don't know if he's still out there. He did want to call in. We have sent the number over to him. I didn't know what question he had, but so he can give a call when he feels up to it. And hopefully that won't be in the middle of when you're trying to explain something else. I know we passed by his question. Everything's gone by like 10 or 15, 20 minutes ago. So hopefully it'll still be relevant, but go ahead, you guys. I know you want to get onto some research that you've talked about in some of the new stuff you're working on. And you've kind of teased us a little bit with that. And I know that there's a lot of that you cannot discuss. So I'm going to kind of hold back from asking too many questions on this because I don't want to delve into an area where you cannot talk about it and just let you guys go. If you want to just talk about some of this new stuff coming up with Louis, the Sun King. Why was he called the Sun King?
Because he identified with the sun.
With Apollo.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was sort of a miracle child. His parents had been trying to have children for some 2 decades.
A lot of miscarriages, yeah.
And suddenly he appeared like the sun. And anyway, he was actually in a theatrical production where he played as a child, where he was Apollo, the Sun King.
Oh, wow.
There's a painting of him somewhere dressed up all golden and shiny. So that carried on.
So maybe there's 2 areas that we can touch on. One is this huge menorah in the gardens of the Chateau of Versailles in France, and how we think they came to this shape And another one, which is interesting maybe for later, is the connection between the Royal House of France and the Knights Templar. But maybe start with this menorah, Chris.
Sure. Yeah. A lot of people, when we first came out, when we first showed the menorah at Versailles, there were a lot of questions. It doesn't look like a menorah. It's not the 9-branched Hanukkah menorah that everyone's familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
This is a 7-branched, straight-armed menorah, and we thought that held some deep significance here. Certainly, both versions existed, but we did a little investigating, and maybe we could go back and do a quick history on this and see the connections that are made between that style menorah and why it's important to the story. I'll try and bring up some pictures here.
All right. Yeah, because we're all used to the traditional menorah that has the curved lines going up to make the the 7 branches of it, and and that's when I first looked, and I have to admit, guys, that when you first brought this up, and I looked at it, in the Google Maps, it did not. I'm thinking that doesn't look like a menorah, and I'm looking at the Google Earth, and I'm looking down on the Versailles, and I'm thinking this is not. It doesn't look like a menorah to me at all. And it really clicked into place when I saw the picture on when Rick, I think it was Rick and some of the team went over to France, and they were actually in the prison, and then they saw the drawing of a menorah on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it hit me, and I went, okay, now they line up. Now the two are okay, I see it now. And that's the straight arm one that you're talking about. Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had that picture.
Can you share, Chris, or do you want me to share? Does it work?
Yeah, are you seeing that picture?
No, we're just getting nothing there, unfortunately.
No. What are you putting up? The straight arm, the Maimonides thing?
This is just a picture of Maimonides.
Okay. Let me see if I can bring that up. If you tell me what picture you want, I'll bring them up.
Oh, there he is. Lost him for a second.
Let's see.
There you go. Can you see him, Chris?
Okay, yeah, I see that. Is that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's Rabbi Maimonides. He was born about 1138 in the Iberian Peninsula, so that is what is now Spain. He was a Sephardic Jewish philosopher. He was one of the most revered rabbis in all of history, and he influenced many great minds. There's a notebook that exists of Isaac Newton, and it's full of his thoughts on this man's philosophies. Don't know if you have that picture, Corjan.
I do.
The notebook.
There we go.
Thank you. So Maimonides, he's known for many things, and he's known also, not widely known for his Kabbalah and thoughts on Kabbalah. That's the notebook of Sir Isaac Newton and his writings on Maimonides. He was a great influence on so many great minds. Even today, we're studying his philosophy. But he states in no uncertain terms that he has concealed in his works the very deepest meanings of the Torah. It's not meant for everyone, just a select few who can read between the lines. And it's his interpretation of the Torah that really interests us in this mystery here. So we mentioned on the show, we believe there's this enormous 7-branch straight arm menorah, and it's laid out in the gardens of Versailles.
Mm-hmm.
Those gardens point directly to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, where Maimonides, he spent some time after leaving what is now Spain. This version of the menorah looks very strange to most people. The 9-branch menorah appears a bit later in history, and the 7-branch menorah is the original version created by Moses on the orders of God himself for the tabernacle, and it's later displayed in the Temple of Jerusalem, in Solomon's temple. The Bible is very precise regarding some aspects of the menorah and how God told Moses to fashion it, but it doesn't say whether or not the menorah should have curved arms or straight arms. Well, this is something for which Maimonides was known for, because he believed very strongly that the menorah was to have 7 straight branches. He was the very first to suggest this, and he included this hand-drawn image in his work, the Mishneh Torah, composed between 1170 and 1180. Maimonides becomes a well-known philosopher and a physician, and although it's disputed here, there are tales of him.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Richard the Lionheart apparently tried to recruit him, but that's, as I said, is disputed. And then he went to work for the court of Saladin, the great enemy of the Crusaders and the Templars. Saladin recaptures Jerusalem in 1187 and reconsecrates the Temple Mount as a Muslim shrine. Temple Mount, as we know, had been the headquarters of the Knights Templar, and it's believed that it was during that time that the Templars discovered the hidden treasures of King Solomon, including the menorah and the Ark of the Covenant. So Maimonides was in Jerusalem praying at the Temple Mount around 1168, while it was still in the hands of the Crusaders. So soon after, he begins work on this Mishneh Torah and records his image of the straight-armed 7-branch menorah. And I can't help but wonder if he was not basing it on something he had actually seen. We do know he had dealings with the Crusaders. He negotiated the release of Jewish hostages. Now Saladin captures Jerusalem, and the Crusader kingdom is moved to Acre, and presumably the Templars would have moved their treasure there as well. In 1250, we see the French King Louis IX defeated. Later, he becomes St. Louis. This is during the 7th Crusade, and he is taken hostage. And after a very large ransom is paid, he is released. But he stays in Acre, and he travels to Nazareth instead of going straight home. When he finally does depart for France in 1254, it is on a ship laden with holy relics, a ship on which a tabernacle was built, just as Moses had built in the desert to house the Ark of the Covenant and the menorah. Now, we don't know which relics were on board this ship, but we do know that Louis had built perhaps his greatest work, the St. Chapelle Cathedral, specifically to house these relics. After arriving in France, he doesn't go straight home. He makes a detour and he visits the shrine of the remains of Mary Magdalene. And shortly after he returns home, work begins on a church, which we're not going to talk about at this moment.
Okay.
But we can say that we have found other representations of the menorah.
Wow.
Specifically, this straight-armed Maimonides menorah in this time frame.
Yeah, and we can also say that this place that he built, for which I have one of the original contracts here, was part of a number of other places that together form a giant pentagram on France, a near perfect pentagram.
Wow.
And not a coincidental pentagram, but one that's been deliberately laid out, where each of the 5 points is clearly unifiable and recognizable with the same giant feature, that if you look at it, you will go, oh my God, how have I never seen this? It's so, there's 2, 3 more Versailles-sized revelations to be made. Maybe an addition on Louis the Ninth coming back from the Crusade. First about ships. Louis the Ninth came back from Acre to the south of France in July 1254 on a boat carrying almost 300 people. That's the 13th century. His boat was called a Nef de Montjoie, was captained by a Knight Templar, brother Ramon or Haman. And we know who he is by now. And you know, Louis the Ninth, who is the later Saint Louis, had very close ties with the Knights Templar. As Chris said, at the beginning of the Seventh Crusade, when he was captured by the Egyptians, he was ransomed, they bought him out with Templar money, not without problems, but they provided the money and he was freed. And then, and we're talking, you know, 1250-ish, he lingered around in the Holy Land for another 4 years, while effectively the crusade had been lost. Jerusalem was fully out of his reach. So what was he still doing? Now in 1251, this is all recorded by his chroniclers. There's a number of chroniclers that described the life of Louis IX that were part of his entourage. So one was, for example, John of Joinville. He was a seneschal of the Champagne region, and he was a close friend. And he wrote a work after the death of Louis IX, in which he describes, you know, in minute detail, really in technicolor, what went down. And he describes that in 1251, Louis IX got into an argument with the Knights Templar, and this is very interesting. So you have to imagine, formally, the Knights Templar weren't answerable to the French king. They were only answerable to, you know, to the Pope and to God.
Yep.
But Louis IX was such a charismatic figure. He was, you know, the archetype, the template of the Christian king. He was incredibly high regarded. He intervened in disputes between other kings. He had an exemplary lifestyle, incredibly pious, and he was larger than life. He was a legend during his life already. So his status that made him into a saint was already part of him when he was still alive. Now in 1251, the Templar Grand Master was Renaud de Vichy, independently negotiated a truce with the enemy, with the Sultan of Damascus. And this is while I believe Louis IX was in Caesarea, in the Holy Land, where he was building defenses and doing all sorts of negotiations with the Egyptians and the local sultans. And when Louis heard of the Templars negotiating their own truce with the Sultan of Damascus, he fell into the rage of a lifetime. He was incredibly angry. And Joinville describes how he summons the masters of the temple in his tent, together with the ambassador of Damascus. He makes them kneel before him, and he gives them this lecture, and he demands some sort of a retribution or repayment for the wrongdoing that they've done. So he tears up this treaty that Renaud de Vichy has just created, and he asks for some sort of payment. And this is when Renaud de Vichy offers the skirt of his cloak to the king, and he literally offers the king all the possessions of the temple. And he says to the king, you choose what you want to have. You choose what will repay our debt. And the writings of Joinville are very unclear about what he chooses. But if you imagine that Louis IX was the first, let's call, mass relic hunter. So he built the Sainte-Chapelle, this magnificent cathedral in Paris, to house the crown of thorns. It's already in, I think, in 1232, 38-ish. He acquired the crown of thorns from the Venetians. He had the Holy Lance, the Mandelion, the effigy, the face of Christ on a cloth, nails of the true cross, a piece of the true cross. All these things he had housed in his Sainte-Chapelle. And it's not described what he chose. But when he gets on board his ship, at least two of his chroniclers, do I pronounce that correctly? Chroniclers, yes. Describe that there are holy relics on board. And even, after 3 days after they've left. So to make the full story, so 1251, this happens with the Knights Templar. He lingers around for another 3 years, and then he leaves Acre just after Easter 1254. So he leaves on April 24, St. Mark's Eve, and the next day, which is actually his birthday, the 25th of April, they are a little bit away from the shore, and then on the third day they get into trouble off the coast of Cyprus. And then when by some miracle the ship starts floating again and it's undamaged, this Templar, brother Raymond, finds Louis IX praying, lying on the floor in a cross shape in front of these holy relics. After they land, where's my focus? After they land on the coast of Hyères in the south of France, these holy relics, they basically disappear from the record. They are no longer described in any document. I can't be more precise because we're full on researching this stuff. But there's reason to believe that in later writings ordered by Louis XIV, every trace of these has been made to disappear. And so there you have link Templars, possessions, holy relic, collecting king, boat back to France, and then 400 years later, Louis XIV creating the world's biggest menorah.
Yeah, and that puts it all together right there.
Yeah, and I think that's all we can share for now, I think.
Okay. That's really interesting. And so, but yeah, so where did those things end up? If that, but in for that ship to miraculously, like you said, start floating again, there had to be a reason for that. And what is that reason? Well, was it the power of God? I mean, was it the prayer that he was doing? I mean, to make that trip. I don't know. That's interesting.
Was it the same dynasty? Corjan, was it the same dynasty? So Louis IX, Saint Louis IX, was he of the same dynasty as Louis XIV?
Yes.
Direct descendant. Yeah.
Saint Louis is the patron saint of the House of Bourbon. He's all over the place. There's a fortress near Oak Island, which has a church that's dedicated to Saint Louis.
Do you mean Louisburg?
Yeah.
Okay. It is in Nova Scotia, but it's not near Oak Island. It's quite far away from Oak Island. But yeah,
I know.
Yes, I know it's named after. No, okay. Yeah. Why do you think these relics were kept by the dynasty instead of being given to the Vatican?
It's a very good question.
Did I stump you?
They may have believed in a lineage. Some of them did, for sure. I believe they were related directly to Magdalene and to the Holy Family. So, and these were all ancient Jewish relics,
Yeah, they believed they were theirs.
And they were rebuilding the temple, basically. Louis built his chapel at Versailles as a Temple of Solomon. And they believe very strongly that for the second coming to occur, you needed the new temple to be built. And
well,
what do you need in the temple?
Before you can build a new temple, you have to have the Ark of the Covenant.
Yes, and all the furniture
and you need
and
a light.
furnishings and a light of the menorah. Yeah, you would want to house it with all the relics.
Right.
Can I just share one image to tease you a little bit? That was
absolutely
commissioned by Louis XIV. I can't tell you where this is and who made it. Some of you might recognize it. I just want to share how we try to substantiate some of these ideas. This is the Lord we're looking at. Now, what is he looking at? He is looking at something weird. Oh, sorry, on the railing here. Let me see if I can. You see this thing? Can you see my mouse move? Do you recognize what this is? That's a shovel. God is looking at the shovel. And maybe this is what they just got out of the ground. A menorah under a veil. And if you look to the right here, this gentleman here, suspiciously like Nicolas Poussin.
Yeah, kind of hidden in the back there between the.
He's the only figure in the painting that is without color. And then over here you have, and that's even more interesting, this is not the Ark of the Covenant. This is just the lid of the Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, wow. It's very clear that there's the cherubim on the top.
Only the top.
Yep.
Wasn't the lid of the Ark of the Covenant called the mercy seat?
Yes.
Yes.
The mercy seat. That's where God spoke to the high priest of the temple from that spot.
This was created in the same year that Louis XIV acquired Shepherds of Arcadia to put in his private apartment in Versailles.
Coincidence? I think not.
I can't tell you.
I know. Yeah, that's exactly right. But that's, oh my goodness. And that's fascinating because that's clearly a shovel down there. I mean, you see what looks like a vase of some sort or something like there, but right next to it in that small little picture, right next to it, that's a shovel. Now, why would there be a shovel in that picture?
This was in a chapel of a chateau, of a personal chateau of a member of an incredibly important member of the royal family, and this was not available for private viewing. And mind you, even a painting like Shepherds of Arcadia that we discussed so much. These weren't public works. Shepherds of Arcadia was never created to put in the Louvre museum to be looked at by thousands of people every day. These were private commissions, made for originally possibly people in the Vatican to be looked at, to be admired, and maybe to be recognized by a small group of initiates who could do something with the clues they would see on the painting. So these were all private works.
So who is the person that's holding the menorah? Is it an archangel?
I don't know. He's an angel in red.
Yeah, he's clear. It's clearly a menorah that he's holding. And it's the curved arms, but it's definitely a menorah that he's holding.
That's a menorah.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about that.
It seems to be covering it and spiriting it away.
Yeah,
the other thing,
he's covering it with something.
Another thing there, which makes this maybe a little bit more plausible, and that very few people realize, is that there was more than one menorah. We always discuss the menorah, the Jewish menorah, the temple menorah, the menorah in the Holy of Holiest. The Book of Kings explains how Solomon or was it David, Chris, or was it Solomon? I can't remember.
Solomon.
It was Solomon. Solomon had 10 copies made of the menorah. So there was an active duty menorah, which stood in the Holy of Holies, lighting the Ark of the Covenant and all scenery there. And there was 10 more menorahs in the hallways lighting the temple. And they would interchange these menorahs. For example, when they had to clean the main menorah, and so they were identical. You can trace the menorah through reading the Torah and some writings, but the most tantalizing writing of all is in the year, I believe it's the year 70. Now, this is the year that the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans. So you had Vespasian, who was the son of the Emperor Titus, who was in Jerusalem, and they really ravaged the city. Now, on the scene was a gentleman called Flavius Josephus. He was a defected Jewish priest. He was a personal friend of Vespasian. And he created a chronicle of the whole event, the Book of War. It's very well known. He's one of the most trustworthy historians we have. That was actually on the scene when the temple was destroyed. And he writes that he witnessed how a guy called Phineas went into the secret storage and he took out 2 menorahs, and gave them to the Romans, 2 menorahs like the other ones in the storage. So if you read, and again, you can buy the Book of War by Josephus on Amazon today and read this for yourself. My conclusion would be, so in the year 70, whatever happened before that, a number of menorahs, at least 3, were still there. You have to imagine they were, I think, 1,000 years old at the time. They were somewhere around the temple, somewhere in a secret place on the Temple Mount. They gave 2 to the Romans. One of them we can see on the Ark of Titus in Rome, which was created, I think, in the year 80. And that menorah allegedly stood in the Temple of Peace in Rome for at least another 400 years until the Vandals sacked the city. But from the writings of Josephus, we know they didn't have 1, they had 2. And there were even more left in the Temple Mount, in the secret storage, which means that it's possible that by the time that the Crusaders arrived and conquered Jerusalem in 1099, and they started, King Baldwin set up his palace on Temple Mount. He gave a part of the palace to the Knights Templar after their foundation. So it's possible that 1 or 2 or maybe even more menorahs were still on the Temple Mount at that time. I mean, that would be consistent with the writings of Josephus.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, and I had no idea there was more than 1. And I know Tom Burns even mentioned that. He said that's right, there was more than 1, and he had forgotten that too.
There was 11.
No, I always, because you always think they're just the 1, but there was actually 10, or you said 11, 10 copies made. Yeah. So there would be 11.
1 in the Holy of Holies and 10 lighting the outer courtyard, 5 per side.
Wow.
And they would be identical. And also, you have to realize these things were enormous. They were as tall as my daughter. So they were, I don't know what it is in feet and inches, but they were 1.60 meters high and something like 1 meter wide. So which is this, and they were heavy. It was 50 kilos of gold.
Solid, 1 piece of gold.
Solid gold.
They had to be hammered out of 1.
Wow.
Should come up when Gary Drayton moves over them.
Yeah. That metal detector, the whatever it was, the 6,000, that should definitely pick that thing up. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow. That's if it's truly there, but man, oh man. So, but those could be, and you said there's 2 of them in Germany, right? Is that what you were saying? Or I'm sorry, you said there was 2 of them on this in another country that are known to be there now. So, right?
No. Two were moved to Rome in the year 70.
Okay, all right.
And they disappeared from the record after the
I
year,
see.
what
Okay,
is
I'm
it,
sorry.
555 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then perhaps, some remained in Temple Mount to be dug up by the Templars. We do know that the Templars did excavation. They were assisted by some Egyptian Sufis. Perhaps they had, privileged information about the site. We don't know. What we do know is that King Louis IX, in the 13th century, spent an awful lot of time negotiating with the Egyptians for, we don't know, but he was offered all the possessions of the temple. And he also boarded the ship loaded with holy relics, for which they built a special tabernacle on the highest point of the ship, which was covered by a very expensive cloth of gold. The king was praying there at
priests,
certain, with priests in special robes. It must have been quite something. Not something you would do
each day, actually. They had a certain robe for each day of the week, and they would attend this tabernacle on the voyage over. So,
it sounded like they had the Ark of the Covenant, because that one was kept, that tabernacle, and it was attended by the Levite priests, and they had to have a special plate that made of. There were some special gemstones arranged in a special order. Yes. And that was to protect them from the effects of the ark, which was radioactive.
Yes.
Or something, for sure.
Absolutely had something special on board. It's not something he just stowed below deck for the voyage.
Right. And it couldn't be touched, as we know.
A purpose-built, movable temple on the ship.
Yeah, definitely couldn't be touched. And you're right. The priest it was very laid out in the Bible. It's very laid out exactly how everything's to be arranged, very precisely.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I always wondered about that too, because I reading the Bible and I hear that and I'm like, okay, why all this detail? Why does it? That makes sense. That makes total sense right there.
It was a powerful thing from what we know, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you couldn't be touched.
Yeah, but how strange that the Pope at the time would let King Louis IX keep all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He asked for permission.
Papal legate.
There was a papal legate in his entourage, and he had to ask for permission. It's recorded.
Yeah, the most powerful king
the Pope
at
gave,
the time.
Yeah, exactly. The Pope gave him permission to bring these relics to Europe.
And where
it's
are
a very extremely good remark, Alessandra. Right on the money.
You mentioned a cathedral called Saint Chapelle. Are there any relics there still on display?
No.
The crown of thorns were moved to Notre Dame in Paris.
Yeah. I don't think that there might be some nails or some, but the big relics have all been moved out.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful, though.
Oh man, it's it's one of the most beautiful places in France.
You mentioned that King Louis might have thought of himself as a member of the Holy Bloodline. Am I getting that right? But isn't that something that he couldn't really publicize, right? I mean, it's a heretical thought, the whole concept of Holy Bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what he could do is he could act like it. And it certainly looks like he did. So if you look at, for example, at the Royal Chapel in Versailles, there's in the entire chapel, there isn't a cross. There's just references to Solomon and his temple. Even the sculpture work about Jesus are all scenes about Jesus in the temple. And you have to imagine he would stand there during certain ceremonies. The king would be standing in the middle, facing the altar, and we now know he would be facing directly to Jerusalem, and everybody else had to face him. They weren't allowed to face the altar or anything; they had to face the king. So he acted as if he was a god in every way. And you know, another one of these factoids that you find in this mystery all the time. I mentioned that Louis IX left Acre in 1254 on April 24. April 24 is the day that the sun sets on the exact center of the giant menorah of Versailles. So on April 24, what was it, last week? If you would have stood in the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles, gazing, you know, out to the east in the direction of Oak Island, you would have seen the sun set exactly in the middle, lighting the central candle of the menorah.
Wow.
Really amazing.
That is truly. And I'm sorry, I know Alessandra's getting ready to ask another question. Hold just for a second, but I know this isn't really, but people say, I've seen people come up and say, well, yeah, you can connect, of course, 2 points together when we talk about Jerusalem and the menorah in Versailles. You can connect 2 points with a straight line. No, it's not just a straight line; it's a straight line going down the center of the menorah, correct? That leads right directly to. It's so if you take that line going straight up the center part of it, that line going all the way down leads to
the main
the main
so spine or the artery.
Whatever you want to call it, the main stem of it or of the base of it, goes down that line. So that line, if you follow that line, it doesn't deviate, it goes straight to Jerusalem. So it's you can say 2 points connected, a straight line connects 2 points, but it actually goes right up that. So if you lead that line all the way down, that's not that you can't dispute. That you can't say is just it's just a
we've been after we had been on TV in season 8. We've been slaughtered online by people who said, any 2 points will always be on a line. That's right. That's correct.
It is.
But 2 points on a line, they don't constitute an alignment. An alignment needs some a number of artifacts. It needs intent and some sort of plausibility. So for it, so you need to be able to connect the two from their context, the historical context, the available technology at the time. And then if you look at Versailles versus the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, was the technology there? Absolutely. The French exercised geometry on a giant scale much earlier than people would hold possible. And we have numerous books by mathematicians, gardeners, astronomers, architects, that even with illustrations of the Palace of Versailles that detail how they did this on the ground, what tools they used, how they used the stars, where they would position people, how they would draw lines, triangulate. So to us, it's completely plausible that they could do this. So that's technology. Then there's intent. Was there the intent? Can we make a link between Versailles and the Temple Mount in Jerusalem that would make a connection between these places plausible? Answer is yes. Versailles is shaped like a giant menorah. The menorah that was housed on the Temple Mount in the first temple, lighting the Holy of Holies, while Louis XIV went out of his way to put depictions of the Ark of the Covenant and the menorah in his royal chapel, behaving like Solomon with all the rituals around it. I don't think that is coincidence. The alignment is too precise. The historical context is too connected, and the technology was readily available. And there are numerous examples of Louis XIV showing his interest for map making, founding the Royal Academy of Sciences with Giovanni Cassini, the French or the Italian astronomer who later established the Meridian of France. They did this multiple times to multiple locations, but only one of them was on television.
Yeah, this is from Court Lindahl here. It comes up Facebook user on the chat here, but yeah, that's from Court, and he says he agrees 100%. Yeah, it was legitimate and was planned. So
Thanks, Court.
Yep.
Okay, I have 2 questions.
Go ahead.
Go on.
All right, one question is about the menorah. How did it actually work? The original menorah. Is there a description of it anywhere? Was it like a candlestick, or was there more to it? Was it fueled with oil, like an oil lamp? Were there candles? Was more technological than that?
No, it wasn't.
I don't know if you still have the manual there, Chris.
Somewhere, yes.
He has a manual for it?
I have the page open to it. Sorry. But yes, it was not a candlestick. It was not like a candelabrum, but it did use olive oil and had cups on there for the oil. And yeah, it was an oil lamp. It was not a candlestick. Although you do see modern menorahs with candles. They usually use beeswax candles only. So there's a bit of a difference there. But the original was an oil lamp, to be sure. Yeah.
It says in the book of Exodus 25:31-40, you are to make a menorah of pure gold. It is to be made of hammered work. Its base, shaft, cups, ring of outer leaves and petals are to be of one piece with it. It is to have 6 branches extending from its sides, 3 branches of the menorah on one side of it and 3 on the other, etc., etc., etc. So it's it reads like an IKEA manual. It's all in the Bible. They tell you exactly what it had to look like.
Yep. And it doesn't say there about being straight or curved, but it's straight.
Nope.
Is like the manuscript that you've shown there, Christopher. Definitely straight on that, and it lines up. Did you have another question too, Alessandra? You're getting an A, by the way. Quite a few people said you're getting an A+ for all your work you've done here today.
I was just wondering if thank you. I was just wondering if menorah was some device of some kind. I mean, Ark of the Covenant was some sort of a device to communicate with God, and then we know that the demon Asmodeus had Shamir, the hissing serpent, a tool that could cut stone. So I'm thinking, well, this menorah maybe was more than a candelabra. But maybe that's a question for Asian aliens, for George Tsoukalos.
I think the logical explanation would be that it's a lamp. And you needed it because otherwise you wouldn't see the Ark of the Covenant. It was very, very dark inside the temple.
Right.
There was some symbology to it. It was said to represent what's known as the Shekinah. And that is the feminine aspect of Jehovah. And if you could imagine that the Holy of Holies was a representation of the universe, of all creation, then the menorah was the lights within that creation as well.
And it was meant to be feminine?
The Shekinah, yeah. You usually hear about a Holy Trinity, right? Father, Son, and a Holy Spirit. Well, the Holy Spirit, I believe, derived from the Shekinah idea. And the Shekinah was the presence of God in the material world. It was said that was needed because if we were to behold God as He is, we would be utterly destroyed. Our material bodies could not handle it. And so the Shekinah was created or separated from Himself to be the sort of active presence of Him in the world. That turns up in the burning bush and also in the light of the menorah.
Do you think the light of the menorah originally came from something like the burning bush? Like there was some kind of an event where this divine light appeared and they managed to capture that with the menorah?
I think that's what it symbolizes, to be sure. I don't know if it was any sort of a otherworldly instrument of any kind, but it certainly symbolized that.
I like the idea of there being a balance between feminine and masculine, let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was having a conversation with another researcher about this yesterday, and I pointed out that the monotheistic religion is so masculine, and in paganism we always had masculine and feminine, and they were, you know, goddess and a god and a goddess, oftentimes as spouses, right? You had that in ancient Egypt with Isis and Osiris, right?
Yes.
But here we are, and it's kind of, you know, out of whack. God is male, and we women are like, well, where's our place, right? So it's I did know that about the Shekinah. I will research that. Thank you.
There's a pretty good book called When God Had a Wife, about the consort of Jehovah.
Right.
There's a few other books out there, but it's thought, there's debate about it, that mentioned in the Bible is this personage is called Asherah. And it's thought that at one time, before monotheism, Jehovah, Yahweh, did have a wife. And that was changed down the line and didn't sit well with some people. And they have split off and gone underground.
Okay, I might be totally wrong with this one. I'll just throw it out there. Doesn't Asherah mean rose?
It means grove, like a grove of trees.
Oh.
And so she had an Asherah pole, which was like a stylized tree, which may have become the menorah.
Yep.
Okay.
And also the tree of life in the Garden of Eden. So
right. And we see something like that in Sumerian, right?
Yeah.
Sumerian, Babylonian art.
I believe it's mentioned in the Bible several times too, about the Asherah pole.
Yeah, and this brings you to the almost literal roots of the House of France, where there's several layers deeper than what you can see, but it really appears they knew their history, and that they felt strongly connected to this whole thing.
Okay, I'm ready to ask my second question.
Yes, please.
All right. Okay.
Can't wait.
So you established that there is an alignment between Jerusalem, Versailles, Oak Island. What are you thinking in terms of timeline? Which site would have been established first? I'm thinking Jerusalem was number one, and then that led to Versailles, and then that led to Oak Island? Or do you think Oak Island predates the construction in Versailles, or were they built simultaneously? Do you have any idea about that?
Trick question, huh?
I think it's likely
Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Jerusalem was there first.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was in the 900s.
That's the source, right?
That was the easy part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What can we say there? Yeah, that alignment was there with Jerusalem and Versailles. Before Versailles was Versailles, I think, as we know it today. And that goes into quite a big history of that land and its ownership. It was owned by the Gondi family, who were very tight with the Medici family. A few previous kings were brought there, said to be hunting grounds, right? But I have other ideas that maybe there was some sort of initiation going on there at that site before Louis XIII built his chateau, and then the 14th built upon that. But it's all just conjecture at this point, but trying to put the pieces together.
Yeah. And the North America link is tantalizing. It's if you follow the Menorah to the east, you land in Nova Scotia. That's clear. You miss Oak Island, arguably, because the alignment is off by under a degree, as I said. By now, we do know the exact point, which is completely and utterly amazing. But we hope to surprise you with that in season 9, if it kicks off. Mm-hmm. I didn't say when, I said if. Mm-hmm. What we do know is that, let's say, the Royal Academy of Sciences, which was founded by Colbert, the Prime Minister of Louis XIV in 1666, had a above average interest in Mahone Bay. And we found some pretty good evidence to support that. And that was, and again, you need to think, did they have the technology? Yes, they did. One of the, they hired a number of people, they hired the best scientists of their age to be on the Royal Academy. There was Giovanni Cassini, already mentioned him, the Italian astronomer, but they also hired a countryman of mine, Mr. Christian Huygens, who was the first guy who managed to make a reliable portable clock. And that was something you needed to be able to record the time between movement of the stars. So
longitude.
Exactly.
Sorry,
so if you to calculate, latitude was known since I think the year 30 or so, or around the year 0 already. The Phoenicians knew latitude, but longitude was a whole different story. And to measure longitude, especially timing, is important. So if you have a stick, a pair of good eyes, and a good clock, you can basically work out where you are. Even if you don't have a map. This is the same way GPS works today. You can go to another country, and a GPS location will tell you what the GPS device will tell you what your GPS location is. That doesn't necessarily mean you know where you are on the map, right? Mm-hmm. That worked the same at the time. In the 1670s, they had portable clocks. They had the knowledge of triangulation, all the mathematics, the astronomy, and again, they had an above average interest in Mahone Bay. Mm-hmm. And that's all I can see.
Since you brought up Colbert, I could tie that back into the Menorah real quick.
Yeah.
Colbert had in his possession an old Jewish book, and Louis had asked him to get it translated. And that book just happened to be the Maimonides Mishneh Torah with the hand-drawn straight-arm menorah in it. And this was just about the time as they were planning the straight-arm menorah in the garden of Versailles.
Yeah, book was translated in 1678. Louis de Compiègne, I think, was the guy.
Yes, but he had it in his possession. I think, some time before that. He likely confiscated it though from Fouquet.
I'm actually going to, I guess, James McQuiston, Jim has tried to call in twice and I've missed it. The phone's here, it never rang. And he's like, he's not answering my call. And I'm like, well, so I'm going to call him right now and see if we can get him on the line because he's got a question. Let's see if I can get this. This is one of them burner phones, let me make sure I can get this thing working here. I'm going to try to call him real quick.
We know Jim a little bit, hold him in very high regard.
Yep.
Maybe this is also the place to say, we work together with Chris Dona a lot. Mm-hmm. We've worked with Aaron Helton, fantastic people.
Sorry about that.
So you know Jim a little bit, hold him in very high regard.
Hello. Oh, hey, Jim, you're gonna have to turn your laptop down or whatever you're watching there.
James.
Yeah, turn that volume down. So there we go. All right, Jim, are you on the line?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we can hear you now. All right. Welcome to the show. Thank you for calling in. I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't mean to ignore you there. I never heard the phone ring.
No, it's okay. I was busy listening to everyone.
Yep, I'm hearing a little feedback there. You're going to have to turn that down. You got the volume on your laptop. You got to turn that down.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I was busy listening to everyone.
Did you have? Okay, there you go. Did you have a question for these guys?
Well, first of all, I just want to say hi to everyone. I've worked with every one of you on the screen, so it's kind of like old home week here to see you all together.
Colleagues.
Yep. Are you still there?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a delay between what I'm
right. That's why. Screen. Yeah, that's why you have to turn that down. You might as well just turn that off because it's going to mess you up. Yeah.
Okay. So, you guys know my William Alexander theory, but the bigger theory, or the bigger what I use is the family connections, and because I've been into that for a long time before I ever got into Oak Island, and there are some connections here that would that do connect Poussin directly to Nova Scotia, and he moved to Rome in 1624, and William Alexander was also there in 1624. He traveled there to get a dispensation for Charles I of England to marry Princess Henrietta Maria, because she was Catholic and Charles was Protestant. And so what's interesting about that is that Henrietta was the sister to Louis XIII, and she would have been the aunt to Louis XIV. And James, Charles' father, James, kind of got the whole thing, the ball rolling with Nova Scotia, but he passed away just as they were getting underway with the Knights Baronet, and Charles took it over. So, and Henrietta was Charles' #1 advisor. Once they got married, they hardly ever left each other's side. In fact, quite often people had to go through Henrietta Maria to even get to Charles. So you have the aunt of the king that you folks are talking about being intimately involved with the whole naming of Nova Scotia and the settling over there.
Right. Yeah.
And so another little family thing here that's very interesting is that, as you know, the first Epinard Arcadia Ego painting was done by a man who was typically known as Gersino. I guess that's how you pronounce it. But his real name was Giovanni Francesco Barberini. Yes. And his family was the same family as Cardinal Francesco Barberini. And that is who not only William Alexander went to Rome to talk to, because he couldn't get to see the Pope, so he had to talk to an emissary, which was Barberini. Yeah. But Barberini was also one of the main supporters of Poussin. He was his patron.
Yes.
And in fact, the very place that the original painting by Gersino shows up in history is in the collection of the brother of Cardinal Barberini. So these families are so tightly knit, all surrounding this painting of Poussin, or at least the idea of the Arcadia Ego, that you have the connection of Alexander being there specifically to talk to Cardinal Barberini, who was specifically the patron of Poussin, And it's in one other little interesting connection here is that the painter for the king was George de la Tour. Well, William Alexander left the area surrounding Oak Island and New Ross, which was called Merlegash. He granted that to Claude and Charles de la Tour, father and son. And they gave their full name as like Claude de Saint-Étienne de la Tour. And George's family was one of his own sons was named Étienne. So it was the same family in France, the Latours that were involved with the painting for the king. And when George Latour quit being the painter for the King of France, Poussin went back and took his place. So all these families knew each other really well. And so because Alexander founded and named Nova Scotia, and because Charles I and his wife Henrietta were his main patrons to go over there and settle it, there's just so many links. And this is the one thing about Oak Island, as you guys all know, is that it's like a web. And this little part connects to this little part, and that little part creeps in. You have a big spider web of it all. What it all means in the end is sometimes a little hard to determine, but you always hear the phrase, it can't be coincidence. Well, it sort of can't be coincidence that three specific families, the Barberini, Alexander, four actually, Stuarts and Latours, were all connected with this story, and they all knew each other in Italy and Rome, and I mean in France and Rome, and then they're all connected with the Oak Island story. So I just wanted to stick that in there somewhere.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. And that was Court Lindahl that I was putting up. His statements there were coming through on that. So thanks again, Court. Appreciate that very much. I was putting up his comments. Excuse me. As you were speaking there, Jim. Wow, that is fascinating too. And the fact that these families are connected. I mean, and again, it's all these little pieces that go together to tell us the story. And again, I wish we could be so definitive on it. I wish we could nail it down and say, yep, this is exactly what took place. But man, the clues are all there, aren't they?
So
one of the writers that has also pointed to William Alexander as being okay, I don't know if I'm talking over you or not.
No, go ahead. You're fine.
Okay, Court was one of the people who we had a number of discussions and traded books, and he pointed to William Alexander fairly strongly as having something to do with Oak Island. So did Mark Finnan, who's one of the more prolific writers about Nova Scotia. So did Reginald Harris, the guy that wrote the very first book on Oak Island. So did Joan Hope Harris. And even Steve Sora got in the mix there in a magazine article I found. So you have a lot of people that have done a lot of deep research that are coming up with something, like I have a specific theory about it, but the bigger theory is that Alexander had something to do with Oak Island, and now we know he was in Rome when he was in Rome talking to the guy who was the patron of Poussin in the same year. The same year that Poussin got there, he got there too.
Wow.
So anyway, it is, I don't know how you'd ever chart this out. I always think, well, if you could, like you say on the Fleece shows, they got all the little stickers of paper and they have the strings running from here to here. Oh my God, we need a barn wall, and that wouldn't be big enough.
can I point something out?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
So we know that Poussin made his painting, Shepherds of Arcadia, and he encoded some kind of a message in it. And that painting seems to fit Oak Island, the swamp, Nolan's Cross quite well. And we know that the king, the French king, acquired Poussin's painting later right? So Poussin seemed to have been informed about Oak Island before the French king. Does it mean
Yes.
that Poussin got his information from Sir William Alexander while they were hanging out in Rome?
Perhaps.
Well, that would be an interesting theory, and you know, I don't think everything has to be like a conspiracy. People just sitting at the pub and say, "Hey, you know, I just was over there last year." My theory is that Alexander actually went to Nova Scotia in 1623, and when the foundation was built up at Alessandra's house.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some reasons for that, but then that he would have, if that's true, whether he did or not, he still had a big involvement there. He sent a ship over there and he wrote a whole story about it in 1624, and then he went to Rome to get a dispensation for Charles to marry Henrietta, and he was in Rome at the same time that Poussin was. So again, we need a real big barn and a whole bunch of twine and a bunch of trium stickum notes.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely amazing. Thanks for pointing that out, James.
Yeah.
I love how
Always
you
great
always stick to the facts and make the connections. Fantastic.
Yeah, it is. I know one of the members, a couple of them actually have commented and said, "Wouldn't it be great if we could get all of you guys, all of you, the Alessandra, you know, we call you CNC, Chris and Corjan, and James McQuiston. Yeah, CNC. We get Corjan and we get James McQuiston, and then we got to get Chris Donut and we got to get Jake Roberts. If we could get all of you guys together in one room around a table, wouldn't that be fascinating, folks? I mean, that would be I don't know. I would be in seventh heaven right there. Yeah, a tailgate party at Jeff's house. Yeah, I got a pretty good sized deck. I don't know if I could fit you all out there, but man, wouldn't that be something? I think we could go all day, all weekend. Just with all the
takes
research
several days, I think.
done. Thank goodness.
Takes several days.
Yeah, it would for sure.
Can I point something out?
Oh, absolutely.
To make another connection again. Thanks, James. For being a pal and always answering our emails and exchanging ideas. Only together we will solve this thing, and I'm absolutely convinced that we're all working on the same secret from a different angle. Fantastic. Shepherds of Arcadia. There's a lot of debate about when this was painted. But the most authoritative source states that it was painted around 1655, and that makes it even more interesting than it already is, because in 1655, a guy named Louis Fouquet was in Rome to buy art for his brother. His brother was Nicolas Fouquet. And he's well known for being the finance minister of Louis XIV, who built this Chateau Vaux-le-Vicomte, where he allegedly bedazzled the king and gave a party that made Louis XIV so jealous that he arrested Nicolas Fouquet, threw him in prison for the rest of his life.
He confiscated Man in the Iron Mask.
Yeah, Man of the Iron Mask.
Oh wow, really?
Or was that really the reason? If you so after 1655, Louis Fouquet, and now again, he's in Rome for a year to purchase art from his from painters in Rome. He's the guest of Poussin. They talk together, and on the 17th of April, 1656, he sends a letter to his brother Nicolas Fouquet, in which he says, this Poussin has a secret so great, not even a king could touch him. It's absolutely amazing. Now, you just brought up Shepherds of Arcadia, the painting on the screen, and now and remember the faces of these shepherds. And then Chris and I will show you a painting of Nicolas Fouquet. I'll bring that up now.
Yep, there we go. Bring that up.
This is Nicolas Fouquet, the man who made Louis XIV jealous. Now, if you look closely at this painting, what do you see here?
A shepherd.
What the hell
Yeah.
are these guys doing behind the curtain
Just
on this painting?
ever so slightly pulled aside.
Ever so hidden. Oh my goodness. Look at that.
And what is this guy holding? What do you think this is, Chris?
Well, it could be a shovel. It could be an oar. I think they are in a boat there.
Isn't that amazing?
Want me to continue with that? Or...
Well, yeah, if you want. I mean,
did you try to match that with an existing painting?
This is a one. This face is a 100% match with Shepherds of Arcadia.
Yeah, I think it's the same character from
with
different
both
sources.
So he had that painting first.
This painting is from. Let me check. I want to. 16. This is 5 years earlier. This is 1650.
Wow.
We talk a bit about the legs that you see there of somebody else.
Right here, yeah.
Stepping away. They only have one shoe on, one sandal.
Oh yeah, look at that.
You see here, this is one.
If you go back in mythology, there is a very famous one-shoed man. That was Jason, of Jason and the Argonauts, the Greek mythology. And of course, he headed the ship, the Argo, across the seas. They had a run-in, the Argonauts, with 6 armed giants on an island. I don't know what 6 armed might remind you of. They defeated these giants and laid them out on the shores of this island. That was one part of the story. Jason, the main part of the story, the Argonautica, is the search for the Golden Fleece. A golden fleece, a ram skin that was hung upon an old oak tree, at the base of which was a dragon or serpent. Now, one of the interpretations of this is that the golden fleece goes back to a tradition of using a woolen fleece stretched over a wooden frame and placed into a running river, and that it would pick up flecks of gold from the river, which you could then hang upon a tree to dry and pick the gold out. It was a way of like panning for gold in a gold river. Wow. So here we have oak trees, gold rivers, 6 armed giants on a seashore. The island was called the Mount of Bears. And it's interesting that Mahone Bay, well, we think it's named for a French type of ship, but in Celtic, Mahone means bear as well.
I want to say something about Argonauts in the year 1655. May I?
Yes, please.
By all means.
I think James McQuiston said in his book that Sir William Alexander saw himself as one of the Argonauts, or maybe even the captain of the ship. Jason. So could this painting have to do something with Sir William Alexander?
It's a good thought.
Also, is James still listening?
I believe he's still on the phone. You there, James?
Yeah, I was just going to add that he wrote a book. Alexander wrote a book in 1624, which would have been the year after it's thought that the New Ross Foundation was built. And it's called Encouragement to Colonies. So if you haven't ever looked it up, look it up. But he starts out implying that he is Typhus, who was the captain of the ship Argo, and that he is going to find the Golden Fleece in Nova Scotia. Well, his good friend was William Vaughan, who wrote had land in Newfoundland and wrote a book called The Golden Fleece. And William Vaughan, I tracked their family down because that's what I do, and he was directly related to Anthony Vaughan on Oak Island.
Wow.
That's in my, I think that's in my Oak Island and the Mayflower book. So here you have people with that concept in their brain of the ship Argo and the Golden Fleece, because they, you know, even Bacon, you know, he wrote the book New Atlantis, was about a utopia, and William Alexander called his New Scotland, it was going to be a utopia. And so that whole concept of, he had a hero, I think his name was Valganon, who was a Frenchman who had helped Scotland quite a bit, and he had actually escaped the troubles of Europe and built himself a little retreat in the woods. And he was like this person that Alexander looked up to. So that's why I think he built that place in New Ross to kind of pattern himself after Valganon. So these people that had a lot of money, you got to think about what the situation was back then. There were plagues everywhere. There were religious wars. A lot of times the people really didn't care which religion they belonged to. They just wanted to keep their head on, you know. So if the Protestant forces were larger, they would sign the thing to the Protestant king and say, "Yeah, I'm Protestant," and you know, vice versa, because they're just the number one motive for everything is survival. And as soon as you survive and you get to be a big shot, now it becomes greed and wanting power and all that. And I think a lot of these guys basically wanted to get out of town. They wanted to escape the religious wars. They wanted to escape the plagues. Alexander talked a lot about how there was virtually nothing left in resources in Scotland and England. And he said, we're down to fishing or attacking other countries' ships with letters of marque as the only way that we can get any money, because we've taken everything away. We mined all the gold, we mined all the silver, we cut down all the trees. You know, we've got to do something. You know, that was his big point. And there was Nova Scotia right for the taking.
May I say something about the year 1655? Sorry, James. Okay. So, Corjan, you said that painting Shepherds of Arcadia was most likely painted in 1655, yes?
Yes.
So that would have been 1 year after the New Ross estate was destroyed by the order of Oliver Cromwell, and it was executed by, it was done by Robert Sedgwick. So that's also from James McQuiston's research. He says that in 1654, New Ross was razed to the ground, and 1 year later we have this painting. I'm not saying that New Ross is on that painting. No, not at all. It just occurred to me that
never know.
1654, 1655.
Yeah,
not a big
well,
gap.
of course, we've seen the post from Aaron Helton online that confirmed that the alignment of let's say the short arm of Nolan's Cross points to New Ross. That's absolutely amazing. Again, without giving everything away, we've shared online that the Versailles Menorah points at various places. So the alignment with Jerusalem, I think, is undisputable. There's another very tantalizing one to the Chateau de la Rochefoucauld, the place that the Oak Island team visited a couple of seasons back. If you look at Versailles from the top, you see a giant Latin cross. The short arm of that cross to the south lands in the courtyard of the Chateau de la Rochefoucauld. It's very precise.
And Rochefoucauld was mentioned on Zena Halpern's map.
Yeah, absolutely. Almost all of these pathways, all of these arms point to significant places. We can give you one other, the Chateau of Montségur, near Rennes-le-Château, confiscated by Louis IX.
Confiscated.
Yes, and it became it came into his ownership. Yes, it was even ransacked and ruined on his command by his orders. And of course, this is one of the locations that people claim for the Grail.
Right.
Allegedly, the night before the chateau was conquered, two people, and this is again recorded in the annals of the Inquisition, two people escaped on a rope, carrying something which we lost trace of. This is one of the places that Versailles points at.
So
And
this was
if you know that the Nolan's Cross has alignments to New Ross, I can only think that's significant.
So the castle.
Yes, and it was kind of
Montsegur.
Interesting how. I'm sorry, I'm getting confused with the screen, but it was kind of interesting how it came about, because I really don't know why I even noticed it, but I just happened to notice it, and I sent it off to the Oak Island team, and then I did a little bit better drawing and sent it off, but I'm no surveyor, so I talked to a gentleman that has done a lot of work on Nolan's Cross, to the degree that's way over my head. But I asked him to do it, and he came up with a legitimate survey. So then I thought, well, the only way we're going to know, or the only way Oak Island's probably going to buy into it, is if Steve Guptill gets involved. So Alessandra picked a point up there that represented the foundation, and Steve, did. It's like you're sighting across the cross arm like it's a surveyor's transit or a rifle. It's not like just a point. And he confirmed it. So then I heard through the grapevine that Aaron had confirmed it too. So it's way over confirmed at this point. But the other point that real quick I'd like to make, then I got to get going too. But people may take Nolan's Cross as some type of marker with a grain of salt, but we absolutely know that stones were used as markers to measure from, because in London there was an actual stone called Charing Cross, and it is the notional center of London, which means that all measurements to the city of London are measured to that actual point. And of course, the only other point in the whole world in all of history that was ever called Charing Cross is New Ross, right down below the foundation. So there is absolutely no question that monolithic type stones were used for measurement devices. So that has to be taken right off the table. And so I'm a firm believer in Nolan's Cross meaning something real serious to this whole story.
Yep, yes, I'm on board with that too. I know Alessandra was going to make a point there too.
It's okay. It's okay. I'll pass.
Okay.
Keep talking.
Bye bye.
All right. Thank you, James.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you coming by. That's great information. You have a great day, sir.
Before we get too far away from Nicholas Fouquet, could we jump back to his dad real quick? Would that be all right?
Let's do that.
Is that okay? Yeah, so 1635, his father, Francois Fouquet, he joins this venture started by Cardinal Richelieu, and it's called the Company of the American Islands. So he's already a very wealthy man. He has this huge library, and it's full of a giant collection of the latest globes and maps of the world. And in this library, you would find a dugout canoe from the Huron tribe in Canada. He was in charge of explorations to the Caribbean settlements for France, as well as the New World. He was instrumental in those early explorations over there. And his library was the meeting place for the captains as they would return, and they would all congregate there and report on their adventures in the New World in Nova Scotia and Arcadia. So that was Nicolas Fouquet's father.
And that's something that, I found out, and I mentioned this in the pre-show there. We were talking about the fact that, King Louis XIV, during his reign, which I guess was one of the longest reigns of any monarch in Europe there, I guess, but he, many of these settlements that you're talking about and the exploration they did in the New World. And I was fascinated to find out when I was reading this and gathering a little bit of research. You guys have a ton, but that Marquette, and I mentioned this earlier, Marquette, one of the men, Jacques Marquette?
Jacques Marquette.
Yeah, and he was the one that actually founded the cities of Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and Ontario, Canada, which are right across the St. Mary's River from each other, which is where I'm from, and also Marquette and St. Ignace, which is on the north side of the Mackinac Bridge. So, I mean, that just tied it all together for me, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is like so. But I really had no idea that, because I hadn't researched it or looked into it before, but it's just fascinating. It just keeps going with more and more and more information.
This thing just keeps giving.
It does. It really does. My goodness. Yeah, Marquette. Yeah, somebody just said John Edwards just said that Marquette University is named after him. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, exactly. So fascinating stuff. Wow, guys, I don't know if you have more to share. We've gone well over 2 hours and almost 20 minutes now. And I know it's getting late for Corjan. If you had more, we could keep going, but it's up to you guys. I mean, this has been a fascinating afternoon. Everybody, just all the chat that's been going by is just talking about how much people are going to watch it a second time because there's so much to absorb here. It's just been a fascinating afternoon.
Well, we enjoyed it very much.
Yeah. So I got to say, so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up now. But thank you so much, guys, Corjan and Christopher. We'd love to have you come back again on the show. We really hope that you get to, I'm just going to say, share this outside of this area, and maybe some of the new research that you're doing, you get to share it. We'll hopefully see you on TV one day. We'll leave it at that. But fascinating stuff. And I can't thank you enough for coming here and sharing this with us today. And then James McQuiston calling in, and we got Cord over there. Like I said, if we could get all of you with Alessandra, if we could get all of you in one room together, what a fascinating day that would be. Man, thank you so much, guys.
No problem at all.
Thank you for having us.
There's one more lady I'd like to acknowledge, which is Charlie Risno. Who's helped us with some of our research, and again, big shout out to all the fantastic people out there that do research in the same or different or neighbor domains. Cord Lindahl, James, Aaron, Jake Roberts, Chris Dona. We're all friends. We all get along, and we're all sharing information to get a better understanding of what went down here. So. And thank you so much for having us, Jeff, Alessandra. It's really a pleasure, and we can really go on forever, and we will if you don't stop us. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I really don't want to, but I try to keep these to 2 hours because it's hard for everybody.
I just want to point out there's a painting behind Christopher that looks suspiciously like the Shepherds of Arcadia.
I have to have
it's
it
the
back
original.
to the Louvre by tomorrow.
It's the original.
The Louvre will reopen in a couple of weeks.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, it's been absolutely fascinating. And thank you again, Alessandra, for being my guest host today, my co-host. It's been you and so many people said, well, you just graduated to the highest ranks of everything with your questions were great. And folks, that's why I asked her to be here, because I provide a platform and I do a little bit of research, but I don't have anywhere near what these folks here have. And that's why I asked Alessandra to be here today, because I knew that she would be an important part of this discussion and provide some information and good questions. And you did not disappoint at all. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Chris and Corjan. And don't forget, folks, we do have Jake Roberts coming on. He's going to be on the show too. He's coming up on the 22nd of May. So that's going to be another interesting afternoon, and you got to really, he's one of the gentlemen like you guys, you can't look away for a moment, because if you do, you're going to miss some important stuff. You can't go, oh, I got to take this call real quick, because if you did, you just lost a whole bunch of stuff right there from that. But anyway, thank you guys so much, and ladies, for being here with us today, and it's been fascinating. And thank you, members, for coming by and joining us today. And again, don't forget to, if you're out there on the Twitch side, just click that follow button, and you can get notified right away when we have new content coming out. And I'm going to do whatever I can to have to do to get Chris and Corjan, what we like to call CNC, to come back on the show again in the future and keep on going with this story. So thank you guys so much. Thank you all, folks. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye-bye now.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye
everybody.
now.